I'm David Linneweh. I grew up in the Chicagoland area from the suburbs there. In 2002 I graduated with my BFA degree in painting from Illinois State University and then went on to receive my MFA degree at Southern Illinois University Carbondale in 2007. And since then I've been teaching at a variety of colleges in the Chicagoland area, podcasting, making art, and I'm excited to be showing here with these wonderful artists. I've been living in the suburbs again for the past number of years. I've kind of changed my work depending on where I go a lot of times, and I'm one of those artists that gets influenced a lot by my surroundings, and so when we moved to where we currently live, I kind of got reinvested in some of these older neighborhoods, and kind of there's a cyclical nature in terms of the way that I think about my work where, you know, those things will set me off and make me think about the neighborhoods that I grew up in, and so that's really kind of where a lot of my work comes from is photography, observing places. I've become an avid runner in the pandemic, and so like it's very funny to me kind of running through all these potential like compositions, but you know, that's a lot of times how that process works, and I'm really kind of affected by light and shadow. Color obviously is something that's very important to me, so as I'm, you know, going through these neighborhoods, essentially I'm looking for compositions. I think it's even interesting in that as I've gotten more interested in observation as an artist, I've maybe taken the same photographs a number of times or kind of reconsidered places at different times of the day, because essentially I'm looking for this, I don't know, it's hard to describe, but like there's a formal thing that you kind of see when light is hitting something in the right way that just kind of is inviting, and for me kind of brings back those feelings of kind of growing up, being nostalgic for the places that I've lived, the memories that we kind of associate with, you know, the suburbs. As someone that is hopefully going to be moving into a home at some point in the future, you know, you start thinking about even like the symbols that we associate with the suburbs, like even something like a barbecue grill or something like that. And so I think a lot of those things kind of tie into my work, this idea of nostalgia, and I think maybe to kind of bring it to the physical work itself, that's kind of what I'm trying to recreate by kind of having that photo transfer that kind of has that element of something that looks kind of more representational and then something that looks kind of more new or abstracted, painted over the top. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just fascinating to me because, you know, I actually started painting homes, you know, after I completed my degree here. So, you know, to kind of drive past these homes that at the time looked very idealized to me. They looked like perfect, you know, because they are, you know, they're new constructions. They look like models. And so I think, you know, kind of reflecting back on some other work, going back to visiting older neighborhoods kind of made me think about the possibility of that in the future. And I think just growing up in that environment, I've always thought about, you know, owning a home one day, owning all my stuff. How am I going to decorate it? And especially now that's, you know, very apparent as I'm hopefully closing on a house. So I mean, that again just kind of ramps it up even more. But I mean, you know, I've had series that explore those ideas as well, you know. Even like the barriers that you have like at the end of driveways that are mailboxes are things that denote my space and your space. And again, I just think that's something that's fascinating to me because, you know, we oftentimes kind of drive past all these places, we don't know what's going on inside. You know, as I was describing to you earlier about the formal qualities, you know, I can appreciate them, but yeah, I have no idea who's living inside, and there is something that's interesting to me about that. And I think to me that idea of a facade or something that is kind of closed off from the interior is meant to kind of maybe play around with that idea a little bit too. And I always think of that like that photo transfer as being something that's worn and aged, like this idealized thing that's just kind of fading, and then, you know, literally like a makeover, or like how you're flipping houses now, like very literally, you know, just slap this idealistic, you know, red paint, you know, like it was brand new, and then you see the underneath that is kind of like this corroded kind of thing. I think way early on I talked a little bit about David Lynch's Blue Velvet in the very opening scene with that kind of like, you know, fire truck, you know, kind of driving by and everybody kind of waving, and it's so pleasant. And I always just, again, kind of appreciated that. And I don't know that it necessarily exactly ties into my work, but I really think about that because there is this facade about it, like that everybody's happy, you know. So even when you do start wondering about these folks that might live somewhere, you don't really know that whole story. And certainly we know there's a lot of, you know, oppression, you know, there's, you know, violence in homes and all sorts of things. So I mean, again, it's just loaded, and I think I kind of like leaving it a little bit open for a viewer to think about that a little bit. I don't think that I'm so pointed in one reading or the other, because I'm conflicted. You know, there's times where it's going to be amazing, and then there's times that I'm, you know, imagining painting stacks of paperwork, you know, that I'm going to be signing off on, or, you know, mowing a half acre or something like that. That's going to, who knows how that could influence things. You know, to think about the idealism that is the American dream is kind of ridiculous. You know, I mean, it's so hard to achieve, as we've been talking about. And, you know, it doesn't, you know, as a fatalist, I guess, this maybe needs to be edited out, I don't know. But I mean, on a long enough timeline, you're not going to have your lawn, you know. And so, I mean, there is a part of it that I look at like this is just what it is, you know. A life is like just making the most of it that you can. And for me, again, I always wrestle with that, though, you know, because like I said, and we've talked about, I just notice things, you know, like you see the way that something looks and it looks beautiful, and then it's like, what does that really mean? What's underneath that? Why do I think that? You know, and I think it'll be about that even related to like how you were talking about a graphic quality. You know, look at just how we're overloaded with social media and being told, again, like what will make us happy is HelloFresh. And, you know, we don't have to go to the grocery store because that's very difficult and too stressful. So, I mean, again, I think that idealism is just a huge part of the American dream, but I think also that's, I guess, one of the cool things is that people can decide for themselves, you know, what is important to them, how to build a life, and hopefully, you know, engage with others to a better purpose, or maybe that's a Boy Scoutish thing. I was only a Weeblo, so I never made it to being a full-on Cub Scout, so. But I think that's something that I try to aspire to, you know, especially as I'm getting older and now, like I said, kind of maybe getting home. You know, it's loaded with all sorts of weird things. I know I talked about stacks of paperwork, but I'm really interested in imagining garages open at different times with light coming into them and just filling up that space. I don't know, so I'm interested in thinking about new ways of kind of exploring this, and I think that's, you know, something that I can imagine exploring for a long time. Kind of like, I remember way back in the day, I would find like a sewer grate or a moving truck, and I'd be like, oh, that's a great symbol. I mean, the American flag is so loaded because, again, we kind of tell ourselves that everybody gets a chance, everybody's doing great. And then we kind of look at, you know, the election cycles and what really changes and all those things. So, I mean, I look at it as kind of like to me, it's just something that I think about related to that idea of American dream. Sometimes it's finished, but I like including that in there because it is something that's supposed to be like America, you know, like everybody has this possibility, you know, or at least that's, I think, what we're told. And again, whether or not you get there, I mean, it really depends on where, you know, the luck of the draw, which is kind of really, you know, again, something that turns you inward and makes you paint homes, right? I think ideally I just want people to be able to kind of maybe reflect on their own circumstances or where they grew up. I think that's one of the things that's really interesting to me, is that I'll have various, you know, attendants at a show that talk to me about how it reminds them of where they grew up, but it might be someplace that's totally different. And I think that's always kind of interesting. My favorite was like, these are all out of California, and they're from like, you know, the suburbs of Chicago. So I mean, like, I think it's a universal thing. I think that's also something that I really like, is kind of appealing to that universal quality, because everybody can kind of think about where they live and reflect on that. And maybe, I mean, again, I don't know that I have a direction for them, unfortunately. I don't know if that I want them to take that and maybe just kind of think about trying to make their life meaningful, but I mean, I really kind of leave it up to the viewer a little bit. But especially, I think it's interesting when I, you know, see especially paintings off at a distance, they kind of look super photorealistic, and then I think when you see them up close, it kind of eliminates that wall of it. You start seeing the construction of it, and I want people to be aware of that. And then I think that is something that's supposed to cue them into thinking about what do these places mean to me, and, you know, and what could they be?